welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 2, and I just want to welcome you because we have some very important things to talk about tonight. I'm Tracey Schroeder, and my website is 2024tracy.com. And tonight we have a very special guest. In fact, I think we're going to be calling tonight an interview with an angry mom. That's right, everyone. I want to welcome Michelle Stevens to the podcast, our angry mom. And whether you relate as an angry mom tonight or not, I just want you to know, Michelle, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate being here and being allowed to the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And so as we get started tonight, will you tell us a little bit of background about what brought you to that angry moment?
Wow. There's a lot that's gone on. I think I've been a special educator since 2013, and I was taught to uphold federal law because special education is federal law, and I was a special educator. So
does that mean you were a special ed teacher in a classroom?
True. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
What age range?
As a special educator, I could teach anyone from kindergarten through 12th, and I did all the grades. So, I liked all of them. They all have their own gifts and their own challenges. Yeah. Yeah.
And what kind of work primarily have you found yourself doing with special needs kids?
Special needs, it's generally either RSP or classroom. I think I do like the classroom better, where you really can get to know the children on a one-to-one basis. You can read them before they, have an issue a lot of times if you can have that more personal one-to-one. And that was where I primarily worked. Yeah.
So you would be like pushing into a classroom. That means you would be spending time inside the classroom, or you're saying that you were doing the RSP, which is where there's a pull out and you have like a small group.
I've done both. I've done push in and pull out classroom styles where, there's a general ed teacher and then I'm pushing in to support. I've done pull out groups, but I've also done separate classrooms, which is called SDC. They don't call it that anymore. There's a very large trend to get away from special day class or, separate classrooms, having them all inclusion. And it really depends on the child because every child has individual needs and they don't all necessarily belong in full inclusion either. So, yeah.
Right. So, so you'd been teaching or you'd been doing special ed support for a couple years.
So I've been doing support and teaching since 2013, and then COVID hit.
Right.
And that was when a lot of us, I think, kind of had a real eye-opening experience. And we went to Zoom.
In that moment, you were doing a lot of small group work at
In
that
that
time?
moment, I had my own classroom.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was...
About how many kids?
About 8 children that were considered emotionally or behaviorally disturbed, so more challenging behaviors, but still
throwing chairs
very teachable.
And
yeah,
harming each other or themselves.
Yeah, aggressive. They may be using profanity. Just really struggle to pay attention and focus at all.
Yeah.
Things like that. And they were challenging kids, but still very enjoyable. And I had my own classroom with them. And what happened was when the world shut down, and they shut down our classrooms, I watched those children really suffer.
Wow.
And
how did it break down for you? You were told you have to somehow connect with them from home. You already had a modality, a platform like Zoom or something like that?
Yeah, well, we all had to learn on the fly, right? We this was new. We didn't know what was happening, and for 2 weeks it was just nothing, just absolutely
that was
nothing.
True for me too, by the way.
Yeah, 2 weeks of nothing, and then they started to say, okay, well, we're going to come back, but it'll be after spring break. Well, we're going to come back, but it'll be, and then the deadline just kept getting pushed. Right, 2 weeks turned into 2 years, type of that, real fast. But before that, we had children that were just missing. They didn't have Wi-Fi, so they're sitting at a hot car, in the middle of May, while their dad's inside working on a job site, and they're in the car on their dad's cell phone, trying to work with a little Chromebook and connect so they could have some type of connection at school.
Poor kids.
Oh, it was just Terrible. It was devastating to watch, and they just wanted to come back to school so badly. I mean, that's where they get their love. Sometimes that's where they get their food, their security, the feeling of safety. A lot of these children are, underprivileged or at a disadvantage in some way, socioeconomically, whatever that is. One kid was just trying to hide beer from mom. So you come from all different backgrounds. So they really do depend on schools a lot for a lot of their needs. And so when that was all stripped from them and they were given no choice, it was absolutely devastating.
Right.
And my own children were both children with IEPs too.
Which is an individualized
education plan. So every child that's in special education has one of these plans, and they go through formalized testing to decide if they're qualified to be in special needs or if they just need accommodations within their classrooms. And that's legal terminology. But basically, the special ed was the next thing after Brown versus Board of Education. You had to get federal agencies involved and federal money involved in order for people to desegregate their schools. And it was the same thing in the 70s with special education. A lot of children in special education were not educated in school. There wasn't special education. It was brand new.
Right.
And so it forced schools to make programs and create programs and get these children into school so they had the right to a free and appropriate public education.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which often is called FAPE.
It's called
right?
FAPE.
Right.
Yes. And I don't want to do too much terminology for people that are unfamiliar, but yeah. So that's our job, is to follow federal law and make sure that these children have access to what they need. So they're accessing the curriculum. And it was across the board disastrous for many, many of our special needs students. They couldn't focus. They goofed around with the computers. They, some of them, especially the more severe children. I have a nephew that's, more severe and absolutely could not get any benefit educationally from Zoom. And it was absolutely criminal what they did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's when I started really paying attention. So in a way, it was really sad and terrible for my own children as well as my students. But it also allowed me time to research and find out what the heck is really going on.
Wow. So what age range were you teaching at the time, and what ages were your kids?
They were 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So 10, 11, 12.
Yeah. That was your class?
That was my class.
Aww.
Yeah. And I love them. They were great. It's hard not to when you build relationships and you have a small class and you're working day in and day out with them. It's really hard to not be, invested in your children.
Right.
Yeah.
At the time that the lockdown year took place, I was teaching 8-year-olds turning 9, right? A lot of them, when it first started, they'd just turned 9, a lot of them. And so it was the people who would feed into your age group.
Yep.
And but it was difficult because they needed to learn how to get on the computer themselves. There were so many skills that they needed, even just to be able to access, the voice of their teacher. So.
Correct. Well, and the parents, we were chasing parents like crazy because parents all of a sudden had to pick up the slack. They were at home trying to figure it out, having to figure out who's going to watch my children. Sometimes they're at home by themselves, and that may or may not go well, and trying to make a living. And how are they even doing that? Because they weren't necessarily being allowed to go to work. Right. So there was a lot of chaos, and just trying to hunt these people down, getting a hold of parents on telling them how to help them. It was very, very challenging. Yeah.
And your kids?
My children now, at the time, I guess my daughter was a sophomore. And she already had an IEP. She was similar to the children I was teaching, so it was like perfect fit. Because I understand that, right? That world of just emotional challenges, behavioral challenges, things like that. And my son was a more mild, more of like an attention deficit type of situation. So my daughter was really the one that really hurt. She was in a special program at a high school in Anaheim Unified. And when they shut down, they were shut down for a really long time. And she really was doing well and thriving in the program until the shutdown. Yeah. and that's when the wheels came off the bus.
Oh, no.
Right. So, so that was really hard to watch because we were helpless to do anything about it. And we were just kind of stuck watching, the failure to thrive occur.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were at that point probably Zooming with your own students.
Yeah.
And then your own kids were probably either nearby or in separate rooms trying to figure it out on their own. Mom, help me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, they just don't want to do the check-ins, because they were trying to do Zoom check-ins, right? So have some type of accountability, and then it wasn't going well, and it wasn't, it just kept getting slacked off and doing less and less, and, the schools, I don't know. I think, that they want to do the right thing, and I think they truly don't know the right thing, and really parents have to be able to take the lead on that. And at the same time, I knew that there's a process you have to go through, and you kind of have to let them try and make their efforts and their expert recommendations, even though I was able to advocate well for my own child being in special education and know the terminology and know the things to ask and all of that. But I had to allow them to do some of the things and fumble and make mistakes so that if things got to a certain point, I could push hard and get what I needed for my child.
So you reached out to the teacher, you reached out to the principal.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was mostly the school psychologist and the classroom teacher that I worked with hand in hand to discuss things, and to various degrees of success. Sometimes they're challenging to get a hold of too, and you don't want to be a helicopter mom, but at the same time, like if your child's not getting what they need, there's more that needs to be done, and you really have to partner.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a very important phase of school too, because they've just gotten through their foundational years.
Yeah.
They've had the introduction to, learning to learn.
Right.
And this is where they're supposed to build on it, really getting ready for those upper grades.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it was watching my students struggling and just wanting to be back in school, watching my daughter who was doing well until they canceled school, and it was very frustrating. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there you were, frustrated. You're surviving.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep your own students afloat.
Yeah.
And support their families. And your own daughter is failing. And what were the signs?
She just stopped checking in with school, stopped doing the work. She always said that she did the work, but she didn't turn it in. It was just this constant round robin of, did she turn it in? Did she not turn, and it's this cycle of lies and stuff, just basically spiraling the drain.
Right.
Yeah. And, just doing less and less and less, and being less and less interested.
Right.
So that's hard.
And did it continue throughout the entire lockdown? Was your lockdown a year? Like ours was?
Ours was pretty close to a year, because really, I mean, it was, I remember the date so well. It was March 16th, 2020, right? I remember the day. She was not allowed back in. Her first day back was my birthday. I remember that. That was the following year, which was April 15th.
Okay.
And I laughed because it was like 2.5 hours, and they were doing 2.5 hours, I don't know, 2 or 3 days a week. I'm like, this is not school.
Right.
That's not anywhere near school, And so it's unfortunate that decisions were made that were not in the children's best interest and the students' best interests, and they were harmed. And, they worry about a couple of months of summer off in recoupment time, right? And now we have a year plus.
Right, a year plus.
And it's absolutely ridiculous. And they aren't gonna catch up. They're just not.
Right.
They are at a deficit, and we're talking about 11th graders that missed their entire 10th grade year. So now, everybody is literally a year behind.
Right.
and they're missing those foundational skills as they spiral upward through the grades. They don't have it. They don't have it.
So when school came back, your daughter, how did she adjust?
Oh, it was by that point she'd been checked out and realized that she can literally get away with doing nothing. So why do anything?
Right.
And so there was zero motivation, and she struggled on and off for years with a variety of things. When she was very young, it was anxiety and depression. And then that rolled into, I don't know, lots of other stuff.
And a lot of people can relate to this because whether their child had special needs, we all have needs, and everyone had been through so much just with the lack of community.
Yeah, there was a lack of community. I mean, it really hurt the children. The masks were especially egregious. And I knew that as a special educator, because when you're working with children specifically on the spectrum with autism spectrum disorder, we have to explicitly teach children on the spectrum what faces mean.
Wow, yeah.
What the expressions mean. What is the emotion that matches the facial expression, and we have to explicitly teach that. And then all of a sudden, we're covering the whole thing up. And kids are missing it. So now what we're having is, I'm like, this is going to be devastating, because I could see, how developmentally this is harmful.
Yes.
And now we've got these children that lived through COVID, as infants and toddlers, and we're wearing masks, and parents were wearing masks. And all of these children are coming in identified as speech. So we're having this massive influx right now of 4-year-olds coming in that they don't have speech skills. They're lacking communication skills. And it's because of we covered up our face. And 90% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
And we took that away from our children.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of harms, and
a lot
really
of teachers did some, they had those clear masks that we tried that smelled like chemicals and toxins, right?
Yeah.
Because what battle do you fight? We're just trying to be back in school too.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember, so I was, I went back, they forced masks, forced tests, and all these things. Yeah. And I would just pull my mask down and say, this is what my face looks like. And I'd show them my expression. And so they would know. They needed to know.
Correct.
And teaching, my students were that year, they didn't need quite so much phonics. Nevertheless, you have to see someone's mouth sometimes to know the sound.
Yes. Yeah. And in special needs, you have other services too, like speech pathologists. When children need speech, they need to be able to see that mouth formation, or where is the tongue placement, or, things like that. And what does it look like? And and I was like, this is really crazy. This is really crazy. Yeah.
So when you're adjusting, helping kids adjust to coming back, it's too short. The time span is too short.
Yeah.
Your daughter, you're concerned about her. She's in probably a new classroom, or adjusting to being in person with someone new and a new group that she's only been digitized with, right?
Right.
And what did the school do? Typically, there's an annual check-in. There's a meeting. There's an IEP, or every 3 years there's a big one. Typically,
yes. So every year you have an annual, and that's an IEP, and it's to update documents and see how they're doing with goals, because you look at specific needs of each child that will help them access the curriculum in a better manner. And so they might have, 3 goals if they're, minorly impaired, or they might have a lot of goals. Maybe some children have 17 goals if they're really severely impaired. So it kind of depends on their level of need. But my daughter happens to be really smart. And just socially awkward, because she is on the spectrum. But, able to communicate well, and for the most part, not really demonstrating much on the ASD. She was very high functioning.
And did they do a meeting on Zoom, like before, like during the lockdown? Was there any form of check-in that took place to support you? Did anything help? And then when you came back, what happened?
We did a lot of phone calls. We did do some Zoom, but mainly, once we came back in person, we did have an in-person IEP where you had to wear masks. And I'm like, well, I sucked it up because I was not going along with that program. And I said, well, I'm going to need to step out so I can take this off and take a breather. So we were at an in-person IEP meeting, when we were required to wear masks, and my daughter was there with her support team. They have a thing called RAP team, and that's the highest level of support, generally speaking, at a school, because you have external agencies that come in, you have parent support, student support, and other type of support. So it's multi-layered, and it's addressing different issues within the family dynamic and all of these things. And so she was there, we were there, we were all there together. And this is we're at this meeting, and it's this large conference table, and the team's big,
And this is at the school.
This is at the high school, yeah.
The principal's in the room?
I don't remember if it was the principal or the assistant principal. They vary because they can all act as an administrative role. So we had an administrator, we had the school psychologist, a school counselor, teacher involved, myself, my mother who was helping me with my daughter, and my daughter, and then the RAP team. So it's this large meeting.
And your daughter was in the room.
My daughter was in the room.
I've got to say that in all my years of teaching, I don't think there's ever been one where the child was in the room.
Well, it's by law that once they start hitting 15, that they need to be included, because what happens is that by 18, they reach what's called age of majority, and legally, they're given the rights to their own education.
Wow. So she was 15 at this point.
So she was 15. She was a sophomore.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Yep. And so she was already starting to identify and, maybe wear boys' clothes or, different gender or whatever. And so she's in the room, and we're all there, and we're all talking, and, it's always good practice to have strengths lead the meeting, and what are her strengths? What is she good at? And talk that part up, because IEPs are generally talking about needs, and that tends to be sometimes more challenging conversations. So they started out with strengths, and what are the strengths? And we all go around, and well, she does so great at this, and she's an amazing reader, and she really wants to help other students, and she's a leader in the classroom, and answers all the questions, and, all these things. And everyone's going around the room taking their time to share what they like about her, what are her strengths, all these things, and positive comments. And it goes around, and I say my part, and then next to me is the school counselor, and the school counselor looks at my daughter and says, "And what pronouns would you like to use?" And the whole time, everyone been saying she. And my daughter didn't bat an eye, didn't have any problem with anything that was being discussed. And with this prompt, because in special education, there's various types of prompts. There's verbal prompts, nonverbal. There's gestural prompts. We learn about the hierarchy of prompts. Verbal is the most intrusive. So, you don't want to tell your kid, pick up your book and open it. You just point to the book, or something like that, so that they can figure out what they're supposed to be doing. And so this would be considered a verbal prompt. And immediately my daughter's response was, oh, they, them, he, him. And I was like, wow. And so I was like, okay, I didn't want to cause a scene because I was pretty angry. And I kind of just had a very firm and assertive conversation with the school psychologist afterward. And I basically told her, I said, that was a verbal prompt. It's not okay. That's promotion and encouragement on a gender ideology. And you better talk to the school counselor, or I'm going to be saying something about it.
So was that completely brand new? You'd never heard it before from your daughter?
I think there's a lot of social media stuff, and my daughter had been, toying with the idea, as are many of the students right now. But the fact that it was, there's a difference between affirming and promoting. And prompting is promoting. And it's very clear that that's exactly what was happening. And now we've learned that there is a lot of promotion happening within the schools as teachers being activists for the various clubs on campuses and all this stuff. I mean, there's only one reason why 23 children out of 30 second graders would all come out in the same month as identifying something other than the gender they were born with or the sex they were born with. Second graders don't know anything about anything unless they're being told and they're being taught and they're being promoted and encouraged and activated. So, it's very clear to me at this point that that's what was happening. And I've been told I have a case. I'm not sure, if I want to proceed with that or not. And I think about it and I pray about it. But I was really mad about it and it wasn't okay.
Right.
Yeah.
What did your daughter say? Did you talk to her about it afterwards?
It's very difficult because, she has indoctrinated herself as much as being indoctrinated by others. It's real easy, as we know, anything social media these days has the algorithms, and they are a huge problem because if you click on one thing, you're going to continue to be fed. It's going to pay attention to how long you've watched something. And the longer you watch something, the more it assumes that you're interested. So it starts continually sending you new content on that same vein.
Right.
And so what happened is, she was seeing a therapist at the time, and the therapist said she's literally sitting at home on YouTube indoctrinating herself because she'll watch a video and then they send in another one and then they send her another one and they start to get more and more radical and more fringe.
Right.
And so she basically did a lot of that. And when you were at home during COVID, you could do a lot of that.
Right.
There was plenty of screen time, so this was the problem. And so she, in her infinite wisdom, realized that because I'm Christian and she was raised that way, that I would not be accepting of her. I can't love her. And she doesn't want to talk to me.
That was the indoctrination.
That was absolutely the indoctrination.
Right. Because
Christians don't believe that.
You
and I'm their
daughter.
mother. And I absolutely, but
and even if she were a boy, you would still love her. You have a son.
Yes.
You love him.
Yeah. I mean, you love the sinner, you hate the sin. Right.
Yeah.
So, that's the whole thing is that, in a world that is full of lies and deceit, someone has to be the anchor of truth. And, she has a history of mental issues, and I adore her and I love her, but I can't even tell her those things. She doesn't talk to me, so she doesn't live with me. But, she'd been in and out of mental hospitals for suicidal ideation, starting at age 10.
Yeah.
And it had been a struggle. And it's very classic. She's like the classic textbook of girls that are buying into this gender ideology situation, both being on the spectrum and vulnerable in that way, but also already having previous mental health conditions or challenges that way. They have distorted thinking. And so she'd already struggled. But the problem is they're not dealing with the problem. They're only dealing with the symptoms. The symptoms is I'm not happy with myself.
Yeah.
And instead of like when we were growing up, middle school stinks, or high school's hard, or, things are hard and socially it's challenging. Yes. And agreeing with that, we're giving these children an option for something that's not right. We're saying, well, if you're not feeling happy about yourself, it couldn't be because you're struggling mentally, or it couldn't be because social pressure is difficult in this day and age. It couldn't be any of those things that we remember struggling with as teenagers too. It must be because maybe you're just not supposed to be a girl. Maybe you're not supposed to be a boy, right? And given the option.
And when you're in pain or frustrated with something in your life, sometimes that easy out, it just seems like that's the answer. That's got to be it, because nothing else seems to be helping, right? And so it's easy to, and there's attention on it and encouragement.
Correct.
And a large part of it is part of human development. Like if you look at any textbook, that's a part of the journey for a lot of people.
Right.
And for really almost everybody, there's that awkward feeling where you're like, I call it molting, right?
Right.
I had a pet bird and went through such an awkward time when his feathers were coming out and he was growing into a grown adult or bird or something.
Right.
And so for kids, they go through that. And I know, I mean, I had to deal with it. I had to deal with, I remember going to a counselor, and best advice, she said, you know, Tracy, you need to learn to love that little, you know, 6th grade girl that is you. And so she had me put it was really good. She had me put a picture of that little girl that I couldn't stand, right?
Yeah.
Next to my bed. She said, you need to pray for her every night. You need to love that little girl.
Right.
And so learning to love ourselves, no matter, you know, what phase we're in, we're not the person we hoped we would grow into, apparently.
Right.
And so we learn to love the gift that God gives us
Exactly.
to be. And so if kids could be given the opportunity to learn to appreciate, you know, even the awkwardness, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it really has to start in the home. And, you know, my parents, you know, they got married in the church, you know, because that's what you did. But it wasn't necessarily a biblical upbringing, you know. And the thing about that is that the Word of God is such a healing gift, you know. And if you start learning that you truly are a gift and that God has thought about you and planned you out before you're made, that changes your perspective, you know. And if we could teach these children that they are truly beautiful children of God, He's got plans on you. He knows every hair on your head. You know, these are the things that are life-bringing. You know, they fill you up. They encourage you. They tell you He's got plans for you, you know, and He's got it all figured out. You know, you just have to step into your gifts, you know, and they don't have to look like everybody else's. And that's how He made us. And so it's really important that if we can share that information. These are things I wish I would have shared. I had shared with me, you know, so that I could pass that on, you know.
Right.
And so, like, you know, my own parents, like, they struggled to be telling me I'm proud of you or I love you or, you know, things like that. So that was something that I just made sure I always did with my own children, you know, just I love you, I'm proud of you. You know, those are things that kids need to hear. And it's really tough growing up, you know, and especially now. I'm so glad that we didn't have social media when I was growing up. I'm so glad that there's not this nonsense, you know, when we were lucky. I feel like, you know, and I want that for our own children, but there's so many bigger things going on in the world that we don't have control over. We just have control over our own little unit at home, right? And the Word of God's really important to all of that. Yeah. Yeah.
So since that time, what did you do then with the school, with the journey? Did you take your daughter out? Like, what did you do?
No, at that point she was already not living with me. Dr. Phil has a term for it. It's called emotional extortion. And what these children do is they threaten to run away, or they threaten to hurt themselves, harm themselves, kill themselves, whatever, in order to manipulate a situation. And so that was the story with my daughter and I. And I asked my mom to step in and help because I didn't want the revolving door of going back into the mental hospital and finding a bed, and then she's hospitalized, and then we've got to do all this paperwork. I don't care about the paperwork, but the point is like, you know, you're trying to have a job and you're trying to get her stabilized, you know, and she's threatening, well, I'm just going to be suicidal again if I have to come home. Well, I'm just going to, you know, so this is the kind of the stuff that she was saying. And so out of desperation and not knowing what else to do, I just said, Mom, can you at least let her stay with you, and we'll get her in therapy and we'll get her in counseling and we'll get her the things she needs so we can stabilize her. So the plan was short-term plan, get her back on track, and then she can come home. Well, she never came home. And she's been with my mom now since just before she turned 14. And she's 19 now. So she's been gone 5 years. And she doesn't talk to me. And my mom, now that she's, old enough as an adult, my mom says, I'm not going to tell you anything she doesn't want you to know, and she's 18.
Yeah.
So it's and then there's familial issues with that. Obviously, that I'm the mom. I care. I want to know what's happening with her. I want to be part of her life. But at this point, it's not the right thing. And I've had to do some hard work with myself. And my I love my therapist because she's been with me since my daughter was hospitalized the first time when my daughter was 10. And she's been truly a blessing. But she just said, you know what? You just have to picture giving her back to God because he's a better parent than any of us could ever be, and that's biblical too, that he takes care of the flowers in the field and the birds, and they're fed and they're handled and they're taken care of and they're loved. So how much more will he do for you? Right. And then we're just earthly parents, right? How much more is he going to do? And he knows what's best. And so, I have to picture that.
What I appreciate so much about what you did was you saw your daughter had a need. You gave her some space. You're not out of her life. You're in her life. And, but because what's going through my mind is, in the bigger world that we might not have been paying attention to before because we thought that, our jobs, our families, and so on were so important. Yeah. There's something that, comes out when you realize, wait a minute, our state assembly voted for AB 665, which would allow and does allow for school counselors to actually secret out kids from their homes and they disappear into the foster care system.
Yeah, the legalized kidnapping. That's what it is.
Yeah, and that's happening. Yeah. And you managed to not lose your daughter completely. Was that before the AB 665?
I think it was before. Yeah. I think it was before, thankfully. She's, because now she's a year out now. She's been graduated, and that was rough too. Like she was, while she was not in my care and she was at my mom's, after that IEP meeting, we had a couple more because she has IEP meetings till we're 18, and she was 17 and a junior at that point. And, she quit school and quit her antidepressant medications that were helping her kind of stay regular and regulated and be kind of on track a little more. And she quit everything. And I said, oh no, that's not going to work, and my mom was going to allow her to, she can just get her GED. It's not, and I'm like, are you for real? So I was like, yeah, that's not okay. She's too smart. She is way too smart to quit school and just be okay with, and I'm not okay with that. And so one of the last things I did was, I call it going scorched earth. And because she was not of age yet to decide for herself, and had been through the system and gone through all the steps, and had been hospitalized again by her own RAP team, who was there to support her. What ended up happening was I said, okay, last step, and that is residential treatment. And I put her in a facility, and we were looking at places in Utah, but we did find one here kind of close by in Southern California. And I got her in there because I'm like, you know what? She's too smart, and I'm not letting her quit. She's going to have something. And so I forced the issue, and a team came and got her, and they took her to the facility, and she was really mad. She was really mad at me because it wasn't her decision. I didn't ask her what her opinion was. And I'm like, you kind of lost that right to an opinion when you're showing me that you can't make good choices for yourself. It was not a good choice to quit school. It was not a good choice to go off your medication. Fine. But as your parent, I still have a say. And, even still, like, she was going to age out, so she got into the facility, she stayed, she got her stuff together, as it were, at least for their standards. Right. And then she was turning 18 before it was time to be graduated. And they're like, well, the school district was like, well, she's going to be 18 and she's going to sign herself out and then she won't have anything and she'll have lost her credits and this and that. And I said, if she signs herself out before 18, then that'll be natural consequences. She won't have anything to show for it. And you know what? Sometimes you just need to do that. So they were wanting to accelerate her program and make sure she had met all of her, requirements to graduate, even though it was going to be 3 months earlier. She has not earned the right to graduate early. That happens when you've kicked butt and taken names and worked your tushy off in school, and she did not. Right. And I really don't feel like the diploma that she's earned is much of anything at this point,
So she's been given a diploma.
She has.
You've been through the struggle.
Yep.
It's not over.
No, she's still...
The journey's still on.
Yeah, she's 19 now.
Because it doesn't end.
No,
that's the thing.
it
The
doesn't,
diploma comes. Life doesn't end. You're still a person on earth. And
I don't know what she's doing. I have no idea what she's up to. I'm not allowed to know, and that's really hard. Right. It's weird, but at the same time, I just have to let it go because it's not within my control, Yeah.
Ooh, that's heartbreaking. That's hard.
It is. It's really hard. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people would realize how much courage it takes to let go and trust in a situation like that.
It's really hard. I mean, I think, as parents, you always want to do what's best for your children, and you know what's best for them, and you want to give them everything. There's a lot of grief in there because there's a lot of dreams. We always have dreams for our children, and there's a lot of loss with children that are not with you, during those special years. There was no prom. There was no, sweet 16 birthday. There was none of that. There was none of that joy and the fun that you remember I remember as a child. I didn't have a perfect childhood, but we had great moments in those times, and yes, it wasn't always fabulous being in high school, but we had some good times, and I wanted that for her, and she missed out on it. And it's so sad. It's so sad.
Well, and in this moment, there's so many kids who went through social disconnect. I mean, we all did.
We all did.
Yeah. And we're still in recovery from it. And so for kids like yours, there's it's a longer journey.
It is. It is. And I think that a lot of these children they're going to have some negative consequences long term for what's been done to them. And I say done to them because it wasn't their choice. And the state, the unions, the people that were in charge at that point didn't give us a choice.
Right.
And, so that's what started my battle. I went to work. I quit teaching for a while. I went to work for the recall of Gavin Newsom.
That's what I was going to say, because the next step is right now you're sitting with it. It's painful. You're in that moment of really it's a break off.
Yeah.
There's been like in therapy, like my master's degree is psychology, and that break off that happens is detrimental. You don't really want to lose that contact because then the growth doesn't impact each other. But in the meantime, you're dealing with and we all know kids, teenagers, they get angry. They're mad at their parents, right?
Absolutely.
I know personally. I knew everything when I was 16.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so growing through those years, those phases, it sounds like it's just taking more time. And here you are facing the break off.
Yeah.
So as you're waiting, 'cause I know you're not letting go.
Yeah.
But in that waiting time, it seems, it's like, it makes me think of in gardening terms, right? When that plant has been through its moment and it looks like, that part, it's dead and that seed falls. So you're in a seed moment. And so you're starting to say something happened, right? So a seed got planted and you're waiting and the rains come down. Yeah. And you got active in something. So tell us a little bit about moving forward in the waiting.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I've had to be in therapy, and I highly recommend it. I've had to redo my circle and uplift and elevate that. So I had to get around more God-centered people, I had to just be in the Word more and just seek out my faith, because we're always on our knees when it's crisis, right? But usually in the good times, we're not. And so once again, I was on my knees and just like crying out, please, and I just begged God to restore my family, to heal them, and return them to me. So, I think he will, and it's his time, but he's doing work on me in the meantime. Right. So I think that's part of the design, because, I could just be angry, or I could learn what God's ways and God's plans are, and, there's a strength in that. And there's also wisdom instead of being impulsive or angry and stuff. So yeah, I was angry, and anger is a great motivator. It can really get you moving in certain ways. And so I was pretty angry, and I started finding out what is happening, and then I just expanded my whole knowledge about everything and how could we do this? This is not what America does. This is not what, and it's this bigger conversation of what's really happening and what's behind the scenes of all that stuff. So, so I started really researching and had plenty of time to do it because, this was during that lockdown part still. And so I learned a lot about it and started getting really involved with, what's happening and understanding.
Where did you start digging? Teacher unions? Did you start digging into how schools are operating?
Yeah, just what was happening with the schools. I think I kind of got... we were fighting the lockdown mandates at the boards of supervisors. That was probably, I went to the board of supervisors for the first time and spoke out in like October of 2020. And then, the election came and went, and that was a travesty and really a coup. So watching all that stuff that was occurring and just realizing this is a really big deal. So the lockdowns were one thing, but then when we watched the election happen and go by and all the stuff, and it was very clear to me what was going on, I just had to realize that there was a lot more to it. And I had to get that sharp learning curve and I figured out, I started working on all kinds of, what's happening with boards of supervisors and what's going on with the mandates and starting to learn more about our constitutional rights and learning more about our freedoms and where they come from. God, not the government, and all of those things, and really finding out where our personal liberties and freedoms come from. And, all the things, because we're right back there. We are in those years leading up to the American Revolution, right, all over again. And it's scary to think that, we can repeat history, but what's happened is by design, we've given our people bread and circuses, right? We give them entertainment and we give them basics that they need, but we're dumbing them down. And
you're talking about in the schools.
Everything. It's all a concerted effort. And when you start really finding out that this has been a long time game, this has been something that's been in the works a very long time, and our parents were not paying attention, and our grandparents weren't paying attention, and it goes back further than that. And you just think, holy cow!
I was looking back, with a class of students, and we were looking at the Declaration of Independence and the rules that they were wrestling with, but they needed to declare all the reasons to declare independence. And looking at that long list, I was recognizing we are dealing with so many of these things. This is our moment. This is our life moment where we need our country back.
We need our country back, and we have to speak truth, and for a long time I had a lot of shame and guilt around my daughter being a mess and that she's not even with me. And it's weird to have a teenager that I don't know where she is. I don't know what she's doing. I don't know what she likes. I don't know those things about her anymore. And it's a really weird thing, but it's also shameful because she was raised in the church. I taught Sunday school before I became a real, before I got my teaching credential, and her name's Faith. But she doesn't go by that. She's got a new name, and I would be dead naming her if I call her that now, right? So it's all this crazy.
Okay.
And but I refuse to do anything other than anchor in truth. I'm like, no, everyone else can, affirm your gender dysphoria or your mental illness or whatever you want to call that. But I prefer to be anchored in truth and God's truth. And you were meant to be who you are. These people are playing God or trying to play God, and I'm thankful that it could be worse because there's Chloe Cole. And I've had the privilege of getting to see her speak a couple times and go to a rally we had in Orange County at a hospital that's doing the gender affirming care for $70,000 of surgery.
Right.
Because it's all money. It's all based on money.
I think that's the biggest issue that it isn't spoken about, right? Because for teachers, like I know in Los Angeles, teachers have to go through hours of training. One is called anti-suicide training, and in that nobody wants their students to go through that. No. But what you do want is life, and anything you can do to help save that life, you will do.
Yes.
And so that's where it comes in. But what you don't realize is the amount of money, and you just said a big number.
Yeah.
The amount of money that's coming in that behind the scenes for something that therapy could help with. Correct. That support in a family, even if you're in an angry phase, angry at your parents, right? But you can get through it in a lot of different ways.
Correct.
But what was that number you just said?
$70,000 of surgery, because of the complications, the complicated surgeries, especially when they're creating new genitalia that doesn't previously exist, and they have to take from somewhere else. These post-surgery pictures are horrific. Like I can barely look at them. They're
seen
disturbing.
Photos of the removal of skin on the leg or on the arm.
Yep.
And it looks like, I've been to Greek restaurants where they have the meat and they shave, and that is what it looks like. And I was speaking about it at an event, and a family said, you know what, that's our cousin, and that it doesn't grow back, and it's now tattooed.
Right.
And I know other people in my life who've been through these surgeries, and it's irreparable. It is painful, and and not everyone's told in advance what pain they will always have. Well,
this is all experimental, just like everything in COVID, right? Everything was experimental then. It's still experimental. They literally have an activist group that's doing the guidelines for all of this medical transitioning and gender stuff. It's all activism. All of it. There is no medical basis for this because this has never been done. Other than child sacrifice back in the day, right? They used to do child sacrifice. Here we are doing it again.
Right.
It's really sad and disturbing, but nonetheless, it's there's a whole money machine behind it. It's why Planned Parenthood is so actively involved in it, and Planned Parenthood plays a huge role in the sexual revolution, in the abortion clinics, and now the transgender social contagion. It's contagious, and it's an illness, and it's permanent damage. And these children are being allowed to make these decisions for themselves, and they don't know. They can't think long term like that. Their brains aren't even fully developed till 25, and we're allowing them to make these life-altering, permanent decisions. And Chloe Cole is a prime example. She's an amazing, strong woman, young woman, 19-year-old. She's the same age as my daughter, and same spectrum. Maybe socially awkward. Didn't like how her body was changing. Like when we all grow up as women, right? And that's the awkward phase.
Sure.
And they're given an option. Unfortunately, she had a medical insurance that some of these hospitals, I could name names, Kaiser Permanente.
Right.
Right. 1 year of identifying as another gender, and they're full force recommending all the things. So she was 12, and then she was transitioning by 13. She's had a double mastectomy. And by 16, she was in full regret and realizing that if she ever wanted to have children, she was never going to be able to breastfeed her children.
Right.
And now she's 19 and a full advocate. She's spoken at the state legislature. I think she's spoken at the federal level. She's an amazingly brave woman because now she's nowhere. The trans community does not accept her, and I'm sure she's put her parents through it. I mean, that would be really rough. But unfortunately, the parents think they're being told good medical advice because they're being told, do you want a dead girl or do you want an alive boy? And like, there's no alternative, and it's complete crap. It's just lies, and it's not the truth.
Well, and then the other side of it is there are so many people, thousands upon thousands, who change their mind later. I know an adult who changed back, and it's difficult. And he said to me that there was no permanent, no actual parts were removed, but there's a process. And when you're a child and you're going and you're just looking for a way through, permanent solutions are not the answer to a moment that's difficult.
That's it. And that's the thing is it's transitional and teenagers' emotions are fleeting. Anyone that has ever had a teenager or been a teenager remembers what it's like. Hormones are raging and you're changing your mind every other minute, and things are difficult, and social situations, and you're stuck somewhere between a woman and a child, and all of these things, and to add that to the mix is just absolutely evil because they're not even giving a choice. They're not considering if there has been mental health issues in their history. My daughter absolutely had a history. I don't think she's transitioned, but when she did turn 18 and I had good insurance, I actually took her intentionally off my insurance. I said, I am absolutely not covering her for anything because I do not want her being able to use my insurance for any type of transitioning, anything. She's going to have to do it all on her own, not with my financial help will I do that. So, and I continue to take that stand because that's the truth. And that's where some people have to stand for truth when in a world that's full of deception.
And there's a community that's been rising up to protect kids.
Yes.
And there's an initiative that is coming forward, hopefully to be on the ballot this coming November, the initiative to protect kids. And hopefully there will be enough signatures. And if not, the signature collecting will continue.
Right.
But anyone who wants to be interested, you want to tell them the website?
It's Protect Kids California. .com, and they are on Instagram and other places too. It's tough because the deadline for getting on the ballot is June 26th, and there's a lot that goes into getting all of those signatures verified and processed. And of course, anything that goes against what the legislature and governance wants will be looked at much more harshly as far as signature verification goes.
Sure.
So it's a very challenging uphill battle.
Yeah.
And in fact, another thing that got on the ballot recently that qualified is something that now our fabulous governor is looking to overturn and remove from the ballot, even though it's under law and we did everything legal to get it on the ballot as an initiative. He's suing now to have it removed because he's not happy about it. So
I didn't quite follow that part.
Oh, so there's another proposition. I don't know if you're familiar with Prop 47.
Yes.
Okay. So there was a ballot initiative that was called End Prop 47.
Prop 47, I believe, had to do with, was it property tax?
So Prop 47 was erroneously and deceitfully called the Safer Schools and Neighborhoods Act.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it was only passed a few years ago.
By the way, was fully supported by the assembly guy where I live.
Right. And Prop 47 was the thing that allowed these shoplifters and smash and grabs to proliferate and ruin neighborhoods and ruin stores and all this stuff. They're telling people in Beverly Hills to stop wearing their jewelry so they're not
Right.
Right, because they could get smashed, like get robbed. And so what it did was it raised the misdemeanor level to 950 instead of it being a felony, and then you've got these soft prosecutors and soft DAs and things like that are happy to turn a blind eye. Let's make crime illegal again. So
Right.
so that has qualified as a ballot initiative, and now Gavin's suing to try to get it off the ballot, even though it was
Right.
legally done by process.
So what you're saying is that even with getting it on the ballot, it doesn't make it a steady, secure thing.
Yeah, it used to be, but
Right.
we don't live in normal times, do we?
Right.
So and if it doesn't qualify for June, that means it goes on the 2026 ballot. That's like 2.5 years of children just destroying themselves further. And
Look, I have friends who their kids were going through, they just wanted to fit in. They just wanted friends. They dyed their hair blue.
Yeah.
They wanted to fit in. And yeah, maybe their hair is still blue, maybe it's not. But just coming together, supporting kids and protecting them, I think is the most important thing for now. And then when they're older, if they want to make other decisions, well, that time can come at least with some real support, with truth, and with knowing what's really behind all of this.
technically 18, they can decide. And I think that makes sense because we allow a lot, that's recognized as adulthood. I would argue that they should wait till they're 25 because their brains are not fully developed. And we live in a different generation. These 18-year-olds are not what we were when we were 18. They were a lot more dependent, and they were a lot more maybe immature in some ways. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of 18-year-olds that should be making that decision, I think. And of course they have that legal right, but yeah, it's permanent, life-changing, and they don't understand the long-term consequences of what they're choosing.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because
And surgery is not what we think it's going to be, right? I mean, I actually have to, I'm thinking like what I just said, I don't agree with completely. Because I shared with some friends, I myself was facing an opportunity to have a surgery where I was feeling awkward and broken and nearly fell for it myself. And it was, a different circumstance, but it's really easy to be fooled. And then it's permanent. And then you're dealing with the consequences of it for your whole life. That's why tattoos, you have to at least be 18.
There
and that's
you
just
go. And that's just a tattoo.
Ink on your arm.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's just, it's crazy town where we live right now. And, and California is trying to be one of the worst states in leading the charge for evil. But, there are a lot of good parents out there. And this is not a partisan issue. This is not red, blue. This is not Democrat, Republican. This is parents want to know what the heck's happening with their children.
That's right.
And, all these people, all these school districts that are trying to do the right thing, it's bashed as an outing policy. It's not. We don't care about that. We're just saying that parents have the right to know what's happening. And I mean, these schools are keeping secrets intentionally. Principals and teachers and everybody's in on it.
Yeah.
And it's got to stop because it's not okay. They're not their children.
Michelle, what message, with all you've been through, with all you're dealing with, what do you have for a mom in the early phase of something like this? What would you say?
I would say get support. I would certainly say you need people around you that are supportive, and whether that might be a church group or a good friend group that's tight. I think prayer goes a long way. I think, being in the Word has helped me, the Word of God. But there are other things out there. There are organizations called PIT. I was told about this, I don't know, a year ago at a school board meeting when we were speaking out against it. And another mom had told me it's called Parents with Inconvenient Truths About Trans. And all of their children they've either lost them or the children have left and they're not talking to them or, different things. And it's all about parents and they're experiencing loss around their trans child. So it's sometimes really difficult to read, and sometimes I just can't. A lot of times it's too close. But it's good in that that you're not alone, because for a long time I felt alone, and I just couldn't share. I didn't even want to bring up the fact that I had children. For a long time, people in my circle, I wouldn't even bring it up. And at one point, God just said, you need to just start talking about it, because this is a problem not just for you. This is a lot of people's problem, and you need to share. Yeah, it might be hard, but the more you talk about it, the less difficult it is. Yeah. And then people start reaching out and saying, me too. And that's good, because you say, well, you just got to stick together, and maybe exchange phone numbers and text each other and lift each other up as much as possible, because it's scary. It's awful. It's, it's horrible. It's in some ways, it's probably worse than the death of a child, because they're out there. They're just not with you. Right. And you don't know what's going on, Yeah. And the LGBTQIA plus 2S, whatever they're calling it these days, is very attractive, because come as you are. They're very accepting. They're very loving. They're all the things that your family wasn't. For lack of a better term. But it's kind of like that gang mentality. There's consequences to. Someone that says, "Oh, we'll be your famly." There's consequences, and it's not necessarily good. Yeah.
Wow. Yep.
Yeah. But there's still hope. There are people that most people, the majority is still, they're getting louder, but they're still a little quiet. It's a minority that think that this is all great, and they're crazy. Yeah. And that's okay, but they are the minority, and you have to just know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle, you're not alone. It's been an honor to have you on today, sharing your story. Thank you so much. Knowing that there's moms out there like you that are fighting, standing by your child, and wanting to protect yours and those like her. It makes such a difference. For everyone watching, thank you so much. This has been Michelle Stevens here with Tracey Schroeder. We care about you. We care about your kids. And if you haven't signed, protectkidsca.com is the website to go to. You'll find the address at the bottom of the page. You can sign it, and be sure on November 5th, actually, starting October 5th, you can actually begin. You can vote for it. And we can continue to do at least the job of waking up people to informing about the billions of dollars that are behind this promotion that's hitting kids inside their schools. Yeah. One more thing to add is that I wish we'd said a minute ago was this is coming on to school campuses, and it's through the school nurses, through the school counselors,
through
and
clubs,
GSA,
yeah,
yeah, and it's starting at age 4.
Yeah, Gender Straight Alliance is one that you got to really watch for. That's a big one on high school campuses. LGBTQ campuses. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. You have to be really aware, and it's in all the curriculum already. So don't think it's not, because this is state rollout. It's all there. Yeah.
It is. And for those who have kids in the private school setting, the state curriculum goes there too.
Absolutely.
So we
100%.
need, as people on planet Earth who care about kids, who want them to grow up to be what they were born to be.
Yeah.
Like that old song, "Free to be you and me," right?
Exactly.
Let's let those kids get every chance that they have.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracey Schroeder. My website is 2024tracy.com, and we'd love to see you back next time. Thanks for coming.